Hello everyone, it's Tingle Creek week, one of my favourite race days of the whole year. Fantastic racing, fantastic atmosphere, and the racing crowd there is so knowledgeable. Main event itself, grade 1 2-mile chase, the Tingle Creek, a race won 4 times by the man who I'm joined with today. That is Barry Geraghty. Thanks for coming on, Barry. How's things?
Very good, Joe. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem, no problem. Thanks for coming on. Tingle Creek, we're going to take a bit of a stroll down memory lane. We're going to go through your Tingle Creek history, Barry. Tingle Creek itself, it's some race, isn't it? What are your thoughts on the race as a spectacle? It's one of the classics, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. And it's a brilliant race. Always has been, even back as a kid watching on. And the railway fences are famous and notorious. Brilliant test, and then that climb in Sandown uphill finish. It finds them out. So it's a brilliant race and a great race to have ridden in lots over the years, and lucky to have won it as many times as it did, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to go back to what I think was your first ride in the race itself, as War Moscow Flyer, where he unseated, and I think Ken Kuss went on to win it that day. Was this your first ride in the Tingle Creek? I think it was, as we just said. And the railway fences, they're obviously what Tingle Creek is all about, what Sandown's all about. Were they as famous back then as they are now?
They were, definitely were. I didn't get as far as that. Well, I got halfway through the railway fences that day. I think it was the first ditch down the back where he jumped it great, but Flagship Morales actually landed in the middle of it, sprawled and landing, and Moscow crashed into the back of him and sent me flying. And it was actually only in latter years. I remember I was chatting with Jessie Harrington, I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago, Punchestown, and just said to her that if that happened nowadays, back in the second half of my career, said I wouldn't have fallen off him. I was just I was complimenting her on her patience, that she never said a word, she never gave out. These things happen, she made nothing of it. So she was a brilliant woman to ride for. But no, I through core strength and fitness, I know I would have sat better as a 30-year-old than I would have as a 22 or 3-year-old.
The race itself was a bit before my time, so I wasn't there on the track. But when I watched it back in the prep for this meeting, it was very unlucky. I mean, Flagship, I think he was going for 4 Tingle Creeks on the bounce, was he? And it was, like you said, the fall itself, I was like, that must have hurt. It was just one of them things, wasn't it, like you said?
It was, but that was a bit of a story. Moscow, one of those things, he'd a habit of doing one of those things, and if it wasn't me, it was him. I think we both we struggled with concentration maybe, but no, that was Jessie didn't give me a hard time over, which was very good of her, but no, that was an annoying one. So it was.
Well, if like they say, the rest was history, because that incident didn't affect Moscow one bit. He roared back with back-to-back victories in the race in 2003, 2004. Let's talk about 2003 first. He was 6-4 favourite. You were keen to be prominent, unlike the previous year. Was that incident in your mind? Let's not get stuck behind horses and have the same thing happen again.
No, he probably hadn't matured at this stage. I think he was 9-year-old, so he wasn't as keen. As a novice, he was very keen, and you had to get him to relax and try and find the rhythm jumping. Whereas at the latter stage, you would ride him more forward. But I don't think the pace of the race was as aggressive that day. As Zertia been in that year? Yeah. So he was coming in as a novice, and he was going to tuck in. So we were happy to ride him forward. But the race worked out as we kind of hoped and planned. St. Cuss jumped a little bit left over the 3 of the railways, the latter end down the back, and Moscow got through on the inside and actually slowed it up when it got to the front end. And just because he was better off with horses on his tail to keep him concentrated. Sorry, Joe, just lost you there, did I?
Lost you there, yeah, lost yourself.
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll carry on. Actually, I looked through the form of the race. You hear me, Barry?
Yeah, I have you, Joe, yeah.
Yeah. I looked through the form of the race, and I haven't seen a Tingle Creek with this much form, strong form. I mean, you had the Arkle winner, the Champion Chase winner, 3-time Tingle Creek winner, and the reigning champion. I haven't seen a Tingle Creek as strong as that for a long time.
Well, it sounds good, all right. Yeah, and I think it was probably Moscow's. It was of his 2 Tingle Creek wins, it was the easier one of the 2, I'd say.
And I love the way at the last, you saw a stride, if you remember, a long way from it. you remember it?
I do. I remember he pinged it. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, brilliant. And then 2004, Moscow wins again. It was the similar scenario. Senkos went out front. You were happy to sit Moscow in behind. You pinged the last of the railways, and Senkos didn't actually take it as well as you, and that meant you hit the front a bit too sooner than what you wanted to. Would you say?
No, I was happy to do that because I didn't mind getting to the front, but I didn't want to be isolated. You know, you wouldn't ride him forward, but I jumped to the front and slowed it up, and stacked up Azertiub and Welsh Chief, and I wanted them on Moscow's tail. I was happy to be on front, but I wanted them sharpening at my heels just to keep him concentrating, and that's what it was all about. And when I took a look over my shoulder, it was to say to the lads, come and challenge, because I wanted company. So I was daring them to get up and challenge and just to keep Moscow concentrating, because if he was left 3 lengths clear, he could very easily stick a leg into one of those fences and we'd come a cropper.
You mentioned the look behind the shoulder. You took one peek behind before the pond fence, and you did it after the pond fence as well. And I was watching the race and I was thinking, that's a bit cheeky, isn't it? Has he got a lot of horse left, as if to say? But like you just explained, that's the reason why.
Yeah, exactly. It was daring them to come have a go, because I needed company. The second last is a big fence. It's a tall fence. It stands up in front of you, whatever way the approach is to it. But it's I wouldn't say a daunting fence, because he's experienced horse at that stage. But you want things right. He was better with something on his heels than if he was 2 or 3 lengths clear.
And then it's really noticeable in the videos, the roar of the crowd. Could you hear the crowd as you were coming up the hill?
I'd suppose the closer you get to the line, and when you realise it's in the bag, at that stage you can start acknowledging the crowd. Until then, you are eyes on the prize, and there's no sound. But yeah, I knew when it hit the line, or about 3 strides before it. This is a moment. Yeah.
3 strides before, it's about right, because you were up the whip was in the air and you were celebrating before you hit the line.
Yeah, exactly. Because I knew how big a moment that was, because that was of all the and since then, of all the clashes, big clashes that are billed by the press, and you get all the excitement and build up and everything, this was the one that really lived up, because all 3 horses went to the last, and they were there after they were good enough. There was no excuses.
And in Moscow, he was brave in this race, and he's still the only 10-year-old to win the race, I understand.
Yeah, exactly, which is a great stat. He turned 11 shortly after that, but I suppose that's a testament to how good he really was.
So you had no ride in the race then until 2012, and you mentioned just then about the build-up of the race. Well, this race was build-up. It was Sprint Sacre, your old mate, versus Sanctuaire. I was at the course this day, and the press were like making this big thing out of it. It was a big matchup between Sprint Sacre and Sanctuaire was going to be the horse to beat him, and all stuff like this. And it was anything but a big matchup from a spectacle. I mean, Sprint Sacre on this day around the railway, he was just majestic, wasn't he?
He was brilliant, yeah. There was Sanctuaire was built up, but I couldn't really find where the weight in his form was. I didn't see him as a threat. If things went right for Sprinter, it was plain sailing. But what Sanctuaire did, his trump card was he went out the gate and he went as hard as he could. The ground was probably close to heavy on the day, and he was a long way clear early down the back.
Far clear.
Yeah, and I was happy just to ignore him, because I knew I was going as fast as I needed to go with Sprinter. And I was happy that, the pace I was going was more the pace to go than the pace he was going. He wasn't going to sustain that gallop, but and I Sprinter reeled him in no time, and he won hard held on the bridle. So it was a brilliant performance, but the opposition would have fallen away by the time we jumped the pond fence. They were dead in their knees. He was the only horse going.
Yeah, it was like he went 12 lengths clear, and I was thinking, I started getting a bit nervous in the crowd. I was like, Barry, you must know what you're doing here, because he's gone a long way clear. But like you say, you had your fractions perfect. Sprinter and yourself, you were perfect over the railways. And then you started eating into the lead. But it looked like you were only going in 3rd gear. And then the pond fence, as you said, you jumped alongside. And then the look back from yourself again. You quite like that looking behind at Sandown.
Yeah. I didn't mind it looking around for Moscow and Sprinter those 2 days. But yeah, you want to have a look and see and make sure, you have the time, you have the luxury. The dangers are, you want to just make sure everything is covered. There's no point, going attacking the second last if I don't need to, or maybe I do need to attack it. So just make sure everything is in order.
Yeah, that was a brilliant race and one that I'll never forget. In 2013, you were third on Captain Conan. I think Captain Conan won the novice chase the year before when you won on Sprinter Sacra, the 8th. Cider Geraghty won the Tingle Creek on this day. I love this lad, and he was a bit of a favourite of Corky Brown's. How was the race for you, and how did it pan out? At one point, I thought you looked like the winner a long way from home.
Yeah, he travelled well and he jumped really well. He had won the 100th the year before when I won in Sprinter the same day. So he ran a good race, but we turned into the straight and all of a sudden Barry Geraghty arrived up beside me, and I knew my fate soon enough, because Captain Conan had ran a brilliant race, but he had no more to offer, and Barry Geraghty ran out a good winner. So it was a good race, but I knew my fate early, I suppose.
Going back from these races on the video, like I said I was doing before, Captain Conan took the Sandown fences, especially the railways, as good as any horse you've ridden. Did it feel like that on the day?
Yeah, no, he was very good, very accurate to jump, really well measured. No, I had some good days on him and lots of fun, but I suppose he just didn't get to the heights of maybe Moscow or Sprinter as a season chaser, and unfortunately he was injured in the end. But he was a good horse. He did really well as a novice, I suppose.
And you mentioned that you got a bit tired out in front. Talk us through the Sandown Hill. Is it a tiring, as long as tiring as Cheltenham, or is it different?
Yeah, it probably is, especially when the ground is softer at that meeting. Generally in Cheltenham during the winter it's harder work, but in the spring it's not as soft. But if they go hard, it's going to be hard work to finish. But Sandown can be a tiring hill because you're on soft ground, but it's a long pull. You're probably half a mile up a steady climb, so it's a long straight, and there's a lot can change from the last fence to the line. It's a long way home.
Yeah. In 2014, Barry, for me, it's one of the saddest moments I've witnessed on the course, and I'm sure you can probably echo that, when Oscar Whiskey fell down the back straight and fortunately was fatally injured. Let's just talk about Oscar Whiskey himself. He was a brilliant servant for you, wasn't he? And connections.
He was brilliant. We had some great days with him. He won the entry hurdle twice. He was placed in champion hurdle, supreme novice hurdle. He would jump well over fences, but he would take a chance now and again. And unfortunately, he took a chance in Sandown, and it was very upsetting. He was a lovely horse, and he was a real stalwart, and we had brilliant days. That all the rail keel hurdles, everything, you could set your clock by Oscar. He'd be any of those 2.5 mile hurdles. It was very, very hard to beat.
It didn't actually look like it was a bad fall. It's more the landing, wasn't it? More than anything.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but it was. Yeah, no, I remember. I stayed in London that night, and I was catching a flight the following morning, and it was very upset. I was that evening, so it was a tough one.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a tough one. Whenever in the crowd lived Oscar Whiskey. It was a very somber finish to a good day. 2015, Barry, Mr. Mole. He was 5th behind Barry Geraghty. I mean, Special Tiara was in this race, and as you know, you've ridden Special Tiara a few times. The pace is always going to be fast. Did it catch Mr. Mole out a bit?
Yeah, they went very fast, and I suppose he could never really get a look in. He was on the back foot all the way, but he found a bit of life at the back of the last, and he ran on well, but the race was over at that stage. So he never really had a look in. He was a good horse on his day, but I suppose he just probably couldn't cut it at that top level.
He's the one as well. The Tingle Creek it's fast paced as most 2 mile chases are, but you've got to be fluent over the fence, and you've got to land running and get away ready for the next one. Mr. Mole, he didn't jump like a 2 miler for me in this race, and like you say, the Tingle Creek at that level, it's going to catch you out, isn't it?
Well, that's it exactly. You need to be able to operate at that speed. And Moscow could, and Sprinter could, and Special Tiara, Senkos, all these horses they could, but Mr. Mole, I suppose, just couldn't really. So he was found out.
2019, your next ride, and it's definitely just saw him. He was electric on this day, and I'd call it a vintage Barry Geraghty ride. Ornua set the fractions, and he looked to go off faster than the Ornua. Was it a fast-paced race with Ornua and Underso?
Yeah, it was. No, it was a strong run race. Ground was very soft as well, so it was hard work. But I was happy all the way on Duffy. He jumped really well, travelled nicely, and we turned into the straight with on the so, and we were creeping and creeping and creeping. And actually, Duffy jumped the last really well, and on the so was a little bit slower, and we landed in front. So I was committed a little bit earlier than ideal because the ground was so soft, and it's a long pull from the last to the line, as I mentioned, and on the so is not a horse you want to get into a scrap with. So we had a ding dong battle from there, and thankfully Duffy just held on. Ideally, I'd have loved to have just played my cards maybe 50 or 100 yards later, but when we landed in front at the back of the last, it was we were all in.
Look, during the race, you were keen not to get too far behind under so. You were shadowing him all the way. Everywhere he went, you went with him. And on the turn for home, the turn for home at Sunday, is that when the race starts as you're approaching the pond fence in the Tingle Creek? That's normally when things start. The screw gets really turned, doesn't it?
Yeah, I suppose, but it's a tough race because you're down over the railway fences. There's not much time to think. You need to get those right, and then when you get over the last railways, I suppose you have a little bit of time. Then you're working on positions from there, from the fourth last. You have a long enough run round to the pond fence. So yeah, you're starting to find your position and work out your challenge when you're going to go. So it probably becomes tactical at that point. But then when you turn into the straight, it's all guns blazing again.
I noticed as well, while Sprinter Saka could jump a fence, land and away in one movement, perfect for Sandown the railways. Duffy sometimes wasn't the most fluent over the fence, but he's very quick at getting away from him. He was just like, as soon as you land, you were into him and he was away.
Yeah, he was a smaller horse, or is a smaller horse. So probably just didn't find it as easy, but he was brilliant to jump. He had a lot of scope, and he was deadly at the last. So he was a horse I loved riding, because you could ask him big questions and he would come for you. And he isn't that big, but he's very brave.
This win on Duffy, it really made you happy, didn't it? Looking back.
Yeah, I was probably only back about 6 weeks from after spending 6 months out with a badly broken leg. So I had an external frame on my right leg for 14 weeks during the summer from Aintree. So it was a tough year, and it was just great to get back on the big stage like that, because as we mentioned earlier, the Tingle Creek, if there's classics in jump races, the Tingle Creek is one of them.
And the race itself, then you've got the walk back through the crowd. It really connects the jockeys and the horses to the crowd, doesn't it, on the way back through?
Oh, it does, and the atmosphere, and it's the start of the Christmas buzz, and Sandown. There's no better meeting than the Tingle Creek, and just the atmosphere, and when you get a good finish like that, and thankfully if you're on the right side of it, is a big help.
Definitely. What does it take to win a Tingle Creek? What type of horse do you need?
Yeah, sure. It's as good a test as there is. It's a massive jumping test, but also then you need a horse with the pace to be able to hold position, and then you need a horse who stays. So it's a real solid test as the Champion Chase or the Arkle of a proper 2-miler. There's nowhere to hide, and it tests all aspects of a horse, I think, really.
It's a race that there's no hard luck stories, is there? It's always a fair race. It's always the best horse normally comes out on top.
Yeah, you could say that. If you're in hard luck with your jumping, it's because your jumping wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And if you didn't get home, it's because you didn't stay well enough. So it's as I say, it's a proper solid test.
So we mentioned you got 4 wins in the race, which is an amazing achievement, Barry. 5 is the record, which is held by Richard Dunwoody. Is there a ride looking back that could have been 5 wins? And is there another horse who didn't actually run for you in the Tingle Creek that you would have loved to have rode?
I suppose the one that got away was probably Moscow's first when I got unseated.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine he as he proved the following years against Senkos, he was more than capable of taking him down. So I'd imagine with a clear round, but the flagship Uberales also fell as well. But I'd have fancied Moscow in 2002, but unfortunately that didn't happen. I can't say there was any other horse who could have or should have been there. Moscow and Sprinter were my 2 best. I suppose Finian's Rainbow, maybe he was a horse who could have had a chance, and it didn't happen for him, maybe. And then the others then were Irish horses, Big Zed, in Ireland as well. So no, I not really, unless you were maybe to find a reason, but I can't think why Finian's Rainbow didn't win a Tingle Creek, or I can't say if he ran and won, but yeah, I couldn't say no.
4 wins, you're happy enough with 4 wins anyway, I think, aren't you, Barry?
I won't be able to add to it at this stage anyway.
No, that's it. Barry, it's been an absolute pleasure talking about the Tingle Creek and your history in the race. You're an absolute gentleman. Appreciate your time once again.
Cheers, Joe. Thank you very much.
I'm sure you'll enjoy this weekend's race wherever you are.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Cheers, Barry. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Joe. Thanks.